Texas real estate once symbolized unstoppable growth, but in 2025 it's facing a turning point, slowing sales, shifting prices, and buyers holding more power than at any time in the past decade. Austin, once heralded as the crown jewel of Texas real estate, now stands as the most vivid symbol of the state's housing market correction. Just 3 years ago, the city's market was described in glowing terms: unstoppable, booming, and fueled by an influx of tech workers, corporate relocations, and millennials eager to plant roots in a place that seemed to promise both opportunity and lifestyle. From 2020 through 2022, Austin was at the center of a housing frenzy unlike anything the city had ever seen. Median sale prices shot past $667,000 at the peak, a figure that left many longtime locals stunned. Homes were being sold in days, often above asking price, with buyers waiving inspections and contingencies just to secure a property. For a moment, it seemed like Austin could defy gravity. But by mid-2025, that story had dramatically changed. According to a July 2025 analysis by Parkle Labs, Austin is now in what they call bear territory, a label that signals an extended and consistent decline in home values. Prices are already more than 20% down from the highs of 2022, and analysts project that values could fall another 16.5% over the next 12 months, making Austin the single hardest-hit major housing market in the nation. For a metro once considered one of America's hottest growth engines, the speed and severity of the reversal has left both buyers and sellers reeling. The numbers tell the story starkly. By May 2025, the median sales price had slipped to $557,500, down 5% from the previous year and more than $100,000 below the peak. Home sales dropped 12% year-over-year, totaling just 861 closings that month, and inventory climbed to levels not seen in nearly a decade. The Austin Round Rock area counted 12,525 active listings, compared with 9,902 a year earlier, a surge that pushed inventory above even pre-pandemic levels. For perspective, this was the highest number of active homes on the market since 2016, a time when Austin was still on the cusp of its meteoric rise. Behind these numbers lies a deeper narrative about what fueled Austin's rise and why the fall now feels inevitable. During the pandemic, historically low mortgage rates, combined with a flood of remote workers and an unprecedented wave of corporate relocations, supercharged demand. Major firms announced moves to the Texas capital, and the promise of high-paying jobs kept newcomers pouring in. Between 2020 and 2022, homebuyers treated Austin real estate less as housing and more as a ticket into one of the nation's fastest-growing economies. This demand collided with tight supply, creating bidding wars and price accelerations that many warned were unsustainable. Those warnings are now proving prescient. Experts inside the city are quick to frame the downturn as a kind of necessary correction. Emily Gerard, CEO of Unlock MLS and the Austin Board of Realtors, has emphasized that what's happening is not a collapse, but rather a return to sustainability. She argues that the pandemic boom created an artificial environment, where price increases far outpaced wage growth or long-term fundamentals. By her account, today's falling prices represent a rebalancing, a painful but necessary adjustment to align Austin with reality. Still, the optimism of industry insiders doesn't erase the concerns of everyday sellers. Many who bought at the peak now face the prospect of selling at a loss. Homes that once sparked a dozen offers in a weekend now sit on the market for weeks, even months. Redfin reported that by mid-2025, homes were averaging 48 days on the market, up from 42 days a year earlier. In some pockets of the metro, Realtor.com data shows properties lingering far longer, with outlying areas sometimes posting average times to sale in excess of 100 days. The shift is jarring, not only for homeowners but for brokers and investors who built their business on the assumption of constant upward momentum. For buyers, however, the picture looks entirely different. After years of being boxed out, sidelined by bidding wars and runaway prices, they finally have room to breathe. Gerard notes that buyers now enjoy luxuries that weren't available during the pandemic boom: time to compare options, space to negotiate, and a wider range of inventory. A first-time buyer with moderate income, once locked out of Austin altogether, may now find opportunities opening up. Yet affordability remains a double-edged sword. Even with prices down 20% from the peak, mortgage rates hovering between 6 to 7% still weigh heavily on monthly payments. The relief is real, but it is not absolute. The broader concern is whether Austin's decline is an isolated correction or the first domino in a wider Texas downturn. Parkle Labs' warning that Austin faces the steepest price decline in the nation has amplified national attention, turning the city into a case study for how quickly a boomtown can overheat. On the ground, sellers are slashing prices, developers are recalibrating expectations, and agents are adjusting to a market where urgency has evaporated. Homes that would have sparked sight-unseen offers in 2021 are now hosting multiple open houses with few serious buyers. In the end, Austin's story as of 2025 captures the paradox of Texas real estate, a state defined by growth, yet vulnerable to the same cycles of boom and bust that define markets everywhere. For Austin, the correction may indeed bring sustainability, but it has already rewritten the narrative from unstoppable rise to vulnerable recalibration. Whether this is the floor or just the first stage of a deeper slide remains the most pressing question, not just for Austinites, but for anyone watching how America's once hottest housing market can cool so fast. While Austin has become the headline story in Texas real estate, the broader statewide market reveals a more complex and nuanced picture. Texas, after all, is not one city but a vast landscape of regions with vastly different economic drivers, demographics, and housing pressures. From the tech-fueled corridors of Austin and Dallas, to the oil and energy-dependent markets of Houston and Midland, and the fast-growing suburban rings around San Antonio, each metro tells its own version of the same larger story, a housing market in transition, cooling after years of breakneck acceleration. As of mid-2025, Texas continues to mirror many national housing trends, but often in exaggerated form. Statewide, median home prices remain elevated compared to pre-pandemic levels, yet the rate of growth has slowed dramatically. The National Association of Realtors reported that the U.S. median home sales price hovered around $398,000 early in 2025, while the Austin Metro's median was roughly $444,490 by August of the same year. In the city of Austin itself, the median price sat at $590,000, while other Texas counties like Caldwell posted medians as low as $227,750. These disparities highlight a defining feature of the Texas market: enormous variation between urban cores and their surrounding counties. The contrast between an affordable Caldwell and a high-dollar Travis County underscores just how fragmented the state's housing market has become. Inventory tells another part of the story. In Austin alone, listings swelled to more than 14,220 in August 2025, with Travis County accounting for nearly half. Statewide, multiple markets are experiencing similar surges. Dallas-Fort Worth, for instance, has seen its inventory climb steadily, and Houston has reported thousands of additional homes hitting the market. Across Texas, months of housing supply, a measure of how long it would take to sell current listings at the existing sales pace, are rising. In the Austin metro, supply reached 5.9 months by August, edging closer to what economists typically define as a balanced market, where neither buyers nor sellers hold a clear advantage. In Bastrop County, supply ballooned to 7.4 months, a sign of real slack in the system, while Caldwell County, at 4.5 months, remained comparatively tight. What unites these figures is a sharp departure from the hyper-competitive environment of just a few years earlier. Between 2020 and 2022, Texas Metro saw homes fly off the market in days, fueled by record-low mortgage rates and an unprecedented migration wave. Families relocated from coastal states in search of affordability, investors poured in to capitalize on surging rents, and developers raced to meet the demand. Today, however, homes linger. In Austin, average days on market stand at 68, and some zip codes now report figures as high as 192 days. In other parts of Texas, similar patterns are emerging, though the exact length varies by local dynamics. The price trajectory across Texas reflects this cooling. While Austin leads with steep declines, more than 20% down from its peak, other metros are experiencing milder corrections. Dallas and Houston, for example, have not yet seen the same magnitude of price drops, largely because their economies remain more diversified and less overheated than Austin's tech-driven surge. San Antonio, with its lower cost of living and slower but steadier growth, has also been less volatile. Yet all face the same headwinds: high mortgage rates, rising insurance premiums, and consumer caution. For many Texans, affordability remains a defining issue. Even with prices softening, a median-priced home still requires significant monthly outlays once insurance, taxes, and fees are factored in. A buyer in Austin, paying close to $600,000 for a modest home, faces payments rivaling those in traditionally expensive markets like Los Angeles. Meanwhile, in Houston or San Antonio, the numbers may look better on paper, but higher borrowing costs erode much of that advantage. The dream of Texas as an affordable alternative to coastal cities is beginning to look more complicated. Still, the broader Texas market retains fundamental strengths that insulate it from collapse. Demographics are one of them. Texas continues to attract hundreds of thousands of new residents annually, driven by job growth, business relocations, and population shifts from other states. This underlying demand provides a buffer against a 2008-style freefall. Additionally, unlike the subprime lending crisis of that era, today's borrowers in Texas face tighter lending standards, reducing the risk of mass defaults. While inventory is growing, it remains relatively constrained compared to the sheer demand created by migration and population growth. Experts predict a balancing act for Texas over the next several years. Analysts like Marco Santarelli emphasize that home price appreciation is expected to moderate, not collapse. Forecasts suggest annual growth of around 4% nationally between 2025 and 2026, though local variations mean some Texas metros may outperform or underperform that average. The most likely scenario is that markets with job growth, particularly in tech, energy, and healthcare, will see pockets of resilience, while overextended areas like Austin could endure a deeper correction before stabilizing. Sellers across the state, however, are beginning to feel the squeeze. In Austin, price reductions are common, but even in Houston and Dallas, agents are reporting longer negotiations, fewer bidding wars, and more cautious buyers. Buyers, for their part, finally hold leverage. They can negotiate repairs, demand concessions, and walk away without fear of missing the next big deal. It is a buyer's market in many corners of Texas, a reversal that few predicted during the feverish days of 2021. Taken together, these trends illustrate a statewide housing market that is slowing, stabilizing, and searching for equilibrium. Austin may be the cautionary tale, but Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, and countless smaller Texas metros are writing their own versions of the same narrative. The boom has ended, and the future belongs to balance. Whether that balance tilts toward modest growth, prolonged stagnation, or deeper declines will depend on forces that stretch far beyond Texas: interest rates, national economic health, and the ever-changing tides of migration. But one thing is clear: the myth of Texas real estate as endlessly rising has been punctured, replaced by a market that now demands patience, strategy, and realism from everyone involved. If there is one factor that has reshaped the Texas housing market more than any other in the past 2 years, it is the relentless squeeze of mortgage rates. For much of the 2010s and into the early 2020s, buyers enjoyed historically low borrowing costs, with 30-year fixed mortgages dipping to levels that seemed almost unreal. Those rates didn't just make homes more affordable, they created the very conditions for the fevered bidding wars and record-setting prices that characterized the Texas housing boom during the pandemic years. But by 2025, that era had ended. With inflation stubbornly high and the Federal Reserve adopting its most aggressive tightening cycle in decades, mortgage rates have climbed into the 6 to 7% range, and many experts expect them to hover there at least through 2026. The immediate effect of this shift is brutal arithmetic. A home that might have required a $2,200 monthly mortgage payment at a 3% rate now demands something closer to $3,400 or more at today's rates, before even adding in property taxes, insurance premiums, and homeowners association dues. For Texans looking at median-priced homes, whether in Austin at nearly $590,000, Dallas at over $400,000, or Houston in the mid-$300,000s, the jump in carrying costs has erased much of the affordability advantage that once drew people to the state. Buyers earning around $90,000 to $100,000 a year, a salary once sufficient to comfortably secure a family home in Texas, are now stretching their budgets perilously thin or simply walking away. These higher rates have also created a psychological shift. During the boom, urgency was the watchword. Buyers rushed to lock in deals before prices climbed higher. Today, hesitation dominates. Potential buyers run the numbers, see the monthly payments, and pause. Even with prices softening in places like Austin, where median values have fallen more than 20% from their peak, the cost of borrowing is so high that many buyers feel no better off. This is the essence of the mortgage rate squeeze. Falling prices don't translate into affordability gains if financing costs rise even faster. Sellers across Texas are feeling the consequences. In Houston, homes that would have moved in days now sit for weeks, not because they are overpriced, but because the pool of qualified buyers has shrunk. In San Antonio, where prices remain relatively moderate compared to Austin or Dallas, the slowdown is still evident, homes linger, and buyers negotiate harder. In Austin, the effect is especially dramatic. Inventory has climbed to levels unseen since before the pandemic, yet many of those listings represent sellers unwilling to accept how much financing dynamics have shifted. They list high, hoping for the old magic, but buyers, constrained by interest rates, either lowball or pass entirely. Developers, too, are adapting. In late 2024 and into 2025, builders across Texas began rolling out 3-2-1 buydown programs, offering to cover part of a buyer's mortgage rate for the first 3 years to make payments more manageable. On paper, a $500,000 home might suddenly seem affordable again, but only for a while. Once the buydown expires, buyers face much steeper payments. This strategy may help move inventory in the short term, but it raises questions about sustainability. Will families be able to handle the payment shock 3 years from now? The reliance on such incentives underscores just how deeply the rate environment has unsettled the market. What makes the squeeze even more pronounced in Texas is the layering of costs beyond the mortgage itself. Property taxes are among the highest in the nation, and insurance premiums have soared, particularly in regions vulnerable to extreme weather. In coastal metros like Houston, insurance bills have doubled in some cases, and in Austin, condo associations are passing down steep fees to meet new state safety mandates. The result is that the true cost of ownership is often thousands higher per month than buyers initially expect. When paired with elevated mortgage rates, this reality drives many would-be buyers back into the rental market, where demand remains strong and landlords retain leverage. Experts remain divided about the future trajectory of rates. Forecasts from Freddie Mac and the Federal Housing Finance Agency suggest that rates are likely to stay in the mid to high single digits through 2026, with a chance of modest easing after that if inflation cools and the economy slows. For buyers, that means the dream of a return to the sub-3% mortgage is gone. At best, they can hope for stabilization in the 5% range later in the decade. Until then, affordability will remain the central challenge, no matter how much prices adjust. For the Texas market as a whole, the mortgage rate squeeze represents more than just a temporary hurdle. It is a structural shift that is redefining how buyers and sellers approach every transaction. Buyers are cautious, methodical, and far less willing to overextend. Sellers are learning that price cuts alone may not be enough to attract offers, especially in higher-end markets where jumbo loans amplify the impact of rate increases. And investors, once a dominant force snapping up Texas properties in bulk, are recalculating their strategies in light of thinner margins and weaker resale prospects. Ultimately, the mortgage rate squeeze has transformed Texas real estate from a frenzied, speculative rush into a cautious waiting game. It has forced buyers to become strategists, sellers to temper their expectations, and the entire market to reckon with the reality that cheap money, the fuel that powered the last great housing boom, is not coming back anytime soon. For a state that built its real estate reputation on growth and opportunity, this new reality marks a sobering adjustment. Texas is still growing, still attracting new residents, but for the first time in years, the cost of capital is dictating the terms of the game. And in this new game, patience, discipline, and resilience may prove more valuable than the wild bidding wars of the past. One of the clearest signs of Texas's housing market slowdown in 2025 is the surge in inventory paired with lengthening selling times. Just a few years ago, listings in Texas's biggest metros, Austin, Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, barely made it online before they were snatched up. Buyers lined up, offers piled in, and homes frequently sold within days, often above asking price. That fever has broken. Now, the landscape looks entirely different. For sale signs linger, online listings sit for weeks, and agents talk less about bidding wars and more about stale inventory. The numbers in Austin capture the trend most vividly. By August 2025, there were 14,220 active listings across the metro, with nearly half concentrated in Travis County. This represented a sharp jump from the same time a year earlier and the highest inventory since before the pandemic. Bastrop County stood out with 7.4 months of supply, a figure that would have been unthinkable during the boom years, while Caldwell County was tighter at 4.5 months. The metro as a whole recorded 5.9 months of supply, pushing closer to what economists call a balanced market. The contrast to the 2021 frenzy, when supply dipped below 2 months in many Texas metros, couldn't be more striking. Longer selling times confirm what the inventory surge suggests: the pace has slowed dramatically. In Austin, homes now average 68 days on the market. Some zip codes stretch far beyond that, 192 days in rural areas like 78948, while inner-city hotspots like 78,719 still see faster activity at around 15 days. This divergence shows how uneven the market has become. Premium, well-located properties can still attract attention, but mid-tier and suburban homes, particularly those priced ambitiously, risk sitting for months. The phenomenon isn't unique to Austin. Dallas-Fort Worth has also seen inventory swell, with more homes lingering in suburban counties as buyers take longer to commit. Houston, though buoyed by energy jobs and more moderate prices, has experienced a steady climb in active listings as well. Across the state, Realtor.com and MLS data highlight the same story: homes are taking longer to sell, and the days of quick closes are behind us, at least for now. This extended time on market creates ripple effects for both buyers and sellers. Buyers gain the rare luxury of time to compare neighborhoods, revisit properties, negotiate concessions, and weigh financial risks. Sellers, by contrast, feel the pressure. Agents increasingly report price reductions, though in Austin's case, many homeowners still resist cutting deeply enough to match buyer expectations. Instead, some withdraw listings altogether, hoping conditions improve. In July 2025, Austin mirrored Miami's pattern, with thousands of homes delisted after languishing unsold. The shift in selling times also highlights a psychological adjustment. In 2021, homeowners expected their property to attract multiple offers within a weekend. By 2025, waiting 2 or 3 months has become the new normal. That recalibration is difficult, especially for sellers who bought at the peak and now fear listing below their purchase price. Meanwhile, agents are forced to adapt their strategies, relying on open houses, targeted digital marketing, and incentives that weren't necessary during the boom. Ultimately, the inventory surge and elongated selling times signal more than just a pause; they mark a structural reset. Texas housing is no longer a market where scarcity rules the day. Instead, it is a market defined by choice, caution, and patience. Buyers now have leverage, sellers must fight for attention, and the old playbook of high pricing and quick flips is proving ineffective. As more listings pile up and homes take longer to move, the balance of power has shifted, and the rhythm of real estate in Texas has slowed to a tempo the state hasn't seen in years. The phrase buyer's market has become increasingly common in Texas real estate conversations throughout 2025, and with good reason. After years in which sellers dictated terms, commanded bidding wars, and could list a home knowing multiple offers would pour in within hours, the pendulum has swung in the opposite direction. Buyers, once sidelined by surging prices and vanishingly low inventory, now find themselves in the strongest negotiating position in more than a decade. The conditions that define a buyer's market are all in play: rising inventory, longer days on market, fewer competitive offers, and a cooling price trajectory. In Austin, where inventory has surged above 14,000 listings, prospective buyers can now sift through options that simply didn't exist during the pandemic. This abundance of choice empowers them to demand more repairs, more concessions, and, crucially, lower prices. Sellers who refuse to adapt often discover their listings languishing, sometimes for months. Negotiating leverage is perhaps the most striking change. During the boom, buyers routinely waived inspections, appraisal contingencies, and even financing conditions in order to win bids. In 2025, that urgency is gone. Instead, buyers are carefully scrutinizing inspection reports, pressing sellers to cover closing costs, or walking away entirely if terms aren't favorable. In places like Travis County, where the median sales price hovers around $590,000, even modest reductions can make the difference in whether a buyer can manage the monthly payment in the current high-rate environment. Sellers who once laughed at lowball offers are now finding them hard to ignore. The shift is evident beyond Austin, too. In Dallas-Fort Worth, buyers have become emboldened by longer selling times in suburban markets. Houston, historically more affordable, still reflects the pattern as insurance costs and property taxes layer additional expenses onto already stretched budgets. San Antonio, where growth has been steadier and less speculative, is also experiencing a recalibration. Across the state, real estate professionals report the same refrain: buyers hold the cards. For first-time homebuyers, this turn represents an overdue reprieve. After years of being priced out by investors and wealthier newcomers, they finally have space to enter the market with less competition. Moderate-income families, particularly those with stable jobs in Texas's growing industries, are finding that sellers are willing to negotiate not only on price but on incentives, offering prepaid insurance, covering association fees, or providing rate buydowns to sweeten deals. What once felt like a locked gate now looks like an open, if cautious, door. Yet the buyer's market comes with its own complexities. High mortgage rates remain a formidable barrier, limiting affordability even when prices fall. Buyers must balance their newfound leverage with the reality that monthly payments can still rival rents in major metros. Many are deliberately taking their time, confident that additional price declines could be ahead. The days of panic buying are over, replaced by careful calculation. For sellers, this shift is a bitter adjustment. Homeowners who bought at the peak in 2021 or 2022 may find themselves underwater or forced to accept offers below what they once imagined. Investors accustomed to quick flips are reconsidering whether holding for rental income is a safer option. Even developers are changing strategies, aware that buyers now expect more than just square footage. They want affordability, transparency, and concessions. The emergence of a buyer's market is perhaps the clearest evidence that Texas real estate has entered a new era. The balance of power has shifted, and with it, the psychology of the entire market. Buyers can finally breathe, shop, and negotiate, while sellers confront the uncomfortable reality that the easy money days are gone. Whether this buyer-friendly window lasts a year or stretches longer will depend on interest rates, migration trends, and the resilience of Texas's broader economy. But for now, the message is unmistakable: in Texas housing, buyers are no longer chasing the market. The market is chasing them. For much of the past decade, Texas homeowners enjoyed an enviable position in the real estate market. Sellers could list a property confidently, often setting ambitious prices, and expect multiple offers within days, sometimes hours. But in 2025, that dynamic has flipped, and the pressure has shifted firmly onto sellers. Across Austin, Dallas, Houston, and beyond, those looking to offload homes now face longer waits, tougher negotiations, and the painful reality that yesterday's playbook no longer works. The pressure begins with time. In Austin, homes now spend an average of 68 days on the market, with some areas stretching into triple digits. Dallas and Houston mirror the same pattern, as buyers take their time, weigh multiple options, and push for concessions. This extended timeline is more than an inconvenience, it means carrying costs mount. Mortgage payments, taxes, insurance, and maintenance eat away at profits the longer a listing sits unsold. For investors who financed their purchases or planned on quick flips, the math has turned punishing. Then comes pricing. Sellers accustomed to commanding premium valuations are discovering that overpricing a listing is no longer a viable strategy. In Austin, where prices are down more than 20% from their pandemic peak, many homeowners are reluctant to lower asking prices enough to meet buyer expectations. Instead, they cling to inflated figures, only to see their homes languish. Eventually, they are forced into price cuts, sometimes multiple rounds, before serious buyers even step in the door. In other Texas metros, price reductions have become standard rather than exceptional, signaling a statewide reset in seller psychology. The rise of incentives adds another layer of strain. Builders and developers have long used perks like mortgage buydowns, closing cost coverage, or free upgrades to lure buyers, but now even individual sellers are resorting to similar tactics. Reports from agents describe homeowners offering to cover homeowners association fees, pay for repairs in advance, or even absorb some insurance costs to keep deals alive. What was once the domain of large-scale developers has filtered down to ordinary sellers who understand that competing for buyers requires more than just listing a property. There is also the emotional burden. Sellers who bought during the pandemic boom, when prices soared and competition was fierce, now face the prospect of selling at a loss. This is especially true in Austin, where buyers in 2021 and 2022 may have paid $650,000 for homes that now fetch barely $550,000. For many, the idea of absorbing that hit is unbearable, leading to an uptick in delistings. In July 2025 alone, Austin saw thousands of homes quietly pulled from the market, with many owners opting to rent rather than accept disappointing offers. Even in luxury segments, sellers are not immune. Multi-million-dollar properties that once attracted cash buyers from across the country are now sitting unsold, their owners forced to shave hundreds of thousands off the list price or wait indefinitely. The assumption that Texas is rapid growth and population inflows would guarantee steady appreciation has been shattered, leaving high-end sellers particularly exposed. In this environment, sellers are learning the hard way that leverage has shifted. Buyers can demand repairs, negotiate steep discounts, or simply walk away. Every month that inventory grows and selling times lengthen, the pressure intensifies. Some homeowners can afford to wait, but for those who need liquidity, whether due to job relocations, financial strain, or life changes, the options are stark: cut the price, sweeten the deal, or risk holding on to a property that may only decline further in value. Texas real estate has always been cyclical, but 2025 has reintroduced sellers to a dynamic they had nearly forgotten: vulnerability. The days of easy wins and instant equity are gone, replaced by a climate where patience, flexibility, and sometimes painful concessions are the only way to move forward. For sellers across the state, the pressure is mounting, and the longer they resist, the heavier the weight becomes. As Texas's housing market adjusts to its new reality, one thing remains unresolved: where does it go from here? On this question, experts are sharply divided. Some argue that what we're seeing now is simply a long overdue correction after years of unsustainable growth. Others warn that the decline is far from over and that Texas, particularly Austin, may face deeper pain in the years ahead. This split in opinion has left buyers, sellers, and investors grappling with uncertainty, unsure whether to move quickly or wait for the dust to settle. On one side are those who frame the downturn as healthy normalization. Leaders like Emily Gerard, CEO of Unlock MLS and the Austin Board of Realtors, point out that the pandemic years created an artificially inflated market. Record low mortgage rates, combined with a surge in corporate relocations and remote work migration, pushed prices far beyond what local incomes could reasonably support. In her view, today's falling prices and longer selling times are not signs of collapse, but of balance being restored. Homes are still selling, albeit more slowly, and demand hasn't disappeared, it has simply shifted. For these optimists, Texas's fundamentals, strong job growth, population inflows, and diversified metro economies, remain solid pillars for long-term stability. The opposing camp paints a grimmer picture. Analysts at Parkle Labs have forecasted that Austin, already down more than 20% from its 2022 peak, could see another 16.5% decline over the next year, the sharpest projected drop of any major U.S. metro. For them, this isn't just normalization but a warning of systemic overvaluation finally unwinding. They argue that high mortgage rates, coupled with surging insurance costs and growing inventories, will suppress demand well into 2026. If migration slows or job growth stumbles, Texas's rapid ascent could turn into a drawn-out slide. National voices also weigh in with mixed perspectives. Some economists, like those at Freddie Mac and the Federal Housing Finance Agency, anticipate mortgage rates will stabilize or even ease slightly after 2026, providing relief to buyers and potentially reviving demand. Others caution that inflationary pressures, or another round of Fed tightening, could prolong affordability issues and keep sales volumes depressed. The uncertainty in national economic conditions compounds the volatility in Texas's local markets. These divergent views filter down into the behavior of everyday players. Buyers, hearing about potential further declines, often hesitate, hoping to secure better deals in 6 or 12 months. Sellers, meanwhile, cling to optimistic projections, resisting price cuts in the belief that conditions will soon improve. This standoff only reinforces the stalemate in many Texas neighborhoods, where homes sit unsold while each side waits for the other to blink. The truth may lie somewhere in between. Texas's real estate market is unlikely to experience the catastrophic collapse of 2008, largely because lending standards remain tighter and housing supply, while rising, is not at glut levels. At the same time, the sheer scale of Austin's price decline suggests that the correction may still have room to run, especially in overheated pockets of the market. The long-term outcome will depend heavily on factors beyond real estate itself, the trajectory of the national economy, the pace of job creation in Texas, and the Federal Reserve's policy choices. For now, the expert divide underscores a larger reality: Texas real estate is in uncharted territory. The market is neither collapsing outright nor returning to its boom-era highs. Instead, it occupies an uneasy middle ground, where optimism and pessimism battle for dominance with each new set of data. Until the fog clears, buyers and sellers alike are left to navigate a landscape defined less by certainty than by speculation. And in a market built on confidence, that uncertainty may be the biggest challenge of all. Texas is a massive state, and its housing market doesn't move in unison. What happens in Austin isn't necessarily mirrored in Houston, Dallas, or San Antonio. As the 2025 correction unfolds, some regions are absorbing the shocks better than others, creating a map of winners and losers that reflects both local economies and broader demographic shifts. Understanding these regional divides is crucial, because the story of Texas real estate is not one of uniform decline, it's one of contrasts. Austin has drawn most of the headlines, and for good reason. Its meteoric rise during the pandemic set it up for the steepest fall. From 2020 through 2022, buyers flocked to Austin, driving prices upward by double digits each year, often beyond what locals could afford. But the very factors that fueled its boom, remote work migrants, corporate relocations, and speculative investors, have now made it vulnerable. As affordability slipped away and mortgage rates climbed, demand cooled dramatically. By mid-2025, home values in Austin were down more than 20% from their peaks, and forecasts suggest further drops ahead. Austin stands today as the most glaring loser of the correction, a city whose market was stretched too thin and is now recalibrating under pressure. Dallas-Fort Worth, by contrast, presents a more mixed picture. North Texas never experienced quite the same frenzy as Austin, but its growth was substantial. The region benefited from a steady stream of corporate headquarters relocations, particularly in suburbs like Plano and Frisco, and its more diversified economy provided a cushion. Prices have softened, and sales have slowed, but DFW hasn't faced the same steep declines as Austin. Inventory is up, and buyers have more leverage than before, yet demand from both businesses and families continues to support the market. Dallas may not be a clear winner, but it is holding its ground better than many feared. Houston tells another story entirely. Long known for its cyclical housing market tied to energy prices, Houston weathered the boom with a degree of restraint. Its sprawling geography and lower land costs allowed for more new construction, which helped keep prices from spiraling out of reach during the pandemic. Today, Houston's market is softer, with longer selling times and rising inventory, but it has avoided the dramatic downturn seen in Austin. Oil and gas jobs remain a stabilizing force, and while affordability challenges exist, they are less extreme than in other metros. In many respects, Houston emerges as one of the relative winners in the current environment, still facing headwinds, but not battered by the same volatility. San Antonio, often overshadowed by its larger neighbors, stands in a unique position. Its affordability, compared to Austin or Dallas, has long been a selling point, attracting both families and retirees. During the boom, it saw an influx of buyers priced out of other markets. Now, that affordability advantage continues to offer some insulation. Prices have cooled and inventory is higher, but San Antonio hasn't endured the same kind of sharp price corrections. For buyers, it represents a softer landing spot, while for sellers, it's still a challenge, but less dire than in Austin. Beyond the Big Four metros, regional disparities grow even more pronounced. Secondary cities and rural areas that experienced pandemic-era spikes, like those near popular lakes or hill country escapes, are now struggling. With fewer permanent residents and less diverse economies, many of these areas relied heavily on second home buyers and investors. As demand has evaporated, listings pile up, and prices sink. These markets are among the hardest hit outside of Austin, a stark reminder of how speculative capital can create bubbles in smaller locales. Meanwhile, parts of West Texas and border regions remain relatively insulated. In markets where prices never skyrocketed, the correction has been milder. Here, housing remains tied closely to local economic fundamentals, agriculture, energy, or cross-border trade. Demand is steady but not explosive, and while sales volume is slower, the absence of extreme highs means there's less room to fall. The divide between winners and losers underscores a central truth: Texas real estate is not a monolith. Austin's struggles dominate headlines, but Houston's steadiness, Dallas's resilience, and San Antonio's relative affordability highlight the complexity of the market. Smaller towns and speculative hotspots may falter, but more balanced regions remain in the fight. For buyers, the opportunities and risks are highly local. For sellers, the pressure varies dramatically by zip code. And for analysts, the lesson is clear: Texas may move together in reputation, but on the ground, its housing market is a patchwork of fortunes. At least for now, the winners are those metros and regions that never flew too close to the sun, where fundamentals like job diversity and affordability kept the boom in check. The losers are those where speculation and rapid inflow sent prices soaring, only to collapse under their own weight. And as the correction plays out, the gap between the two may only grow wider. Migration has always been one of the strongest forces shaping Texas real estate. For much of the last decade, the Lone Star State stood as one of the nation's top migration magnets, drawing families, professionals, and retirees with promises of job growth, affordability, and lower taxes. Cities like Austin, Dallas, Houston, and San Antonio became symbols of opportunity, with newcomers arriving from California, New York, Illinois, and beyond. But in 2025, that once unstoppable tide of inbound migration is shifting, and the ripple effects are beginning to reshape demand across the state's housing markets. The pandemic-era surge was unlike anything Texas had seen before. Remote workers flooded in, attracted by spacious homes, warmer weather, and the perception of better value compared to coastal markets. Austin epitomized this wave, doubling down on its identity as the Silicon Hills as tech giants expanded operations there. But the very migration that pushed prices up has now created barriers for future movers. Many would-be buyers, especially younger households, now see Texas not as a place of affordability but as a market carrying the same high costs and risks they hoped to escape elsewhere. This change in perception is crucial. Once Texas was the escape valve for Americans priced out of California's Bay Area or Los Angeles. Today, however, the gap in affordability has narrowed. Rising home values, high mortgage rates, and ballooning insurance costs mean that the dream of a cheaper life in Austin or Dallas isn't as clear-cut as it was in 2020. For some, especially those without high-paying remote jobs or relocation packages, the math no longer works. And when migration slows, so does the engine that fueled much of Texas's housing boom. At the same time, there's a geographic rebalancing underway within Texas itself. As Austin's costs have soared, some buyers have looked toward San Antonio, where housing remains more affordable, or to Houston, where land supply helps temper price spikes. This interstate migration creates pockets of strength even as statewide demand softens. It's not that people are abandoning Texas altogether, but rather that they are recalibrating where within the state they can still make their lives work financially. Outbound migration is also becoming part of the narrative. Families that once viewed Texas as their final destination are now reconsidering, citing rising living costs and mounting homeowner expenses. Insurance premiums that doubled in just a few years, special assessments in condo markets, and property tax burdens have sent some residents packing for cheaper cities in states like Tennessee, Georgia, or the Carolinas. While Texas still benefits from strong population growth relative to many states, the slowing pace, and the possibility of net outflows in certain metros, casts a long shadow. Ultimately, migration patterns are reshaping demand in ways that no seller or buyer can ignore. If the inflow of affluent remote workers and corporate relocation slows, demand will rely more heavily on local incomes, which remain modest compared to the heights of pandemic-era prices. That recalibration means homes may sit longer, prices may drift lower, and builders may have to scale back ambitious projects. For now, Texas remains a destination, but it's no longer the unstoppable juggernaut it once seemed. The state's housing market is learning that even in a place as big and dynamic as Texas, migration, once a guaranteed lifeline, is now a question mark. Looking ahead to 2026 and beyond, Texas's housing market stands at a crossroads. The turbulence of 2023 through 2025 has left buyers, sellers, and investors searching for clarity about what comes next. Will the market stabilize and return to steady growth, or will the correction deepen into something more painful? The answer depends on a complex mix of economic conditions, policy choices, and shifting consumer behavior, all of which make the outlook for Texas both fascinating and uncertain. One of the biggest factors shaping the future will be mortgage rates. If the Federal Reserve begins easing monetary policy in late 2025 or 2026, even a modest drop in rates could spark renewed buyer interest. For many households, affordability hinges not on list prices alone but on the monthly payments dictated by financing. A move from 7% mortgage rates to something closer to 5.5% could bring thousands of sidelined buyers back into the game. Yet the reverse is also possible. If inflation proves sticky and rates remain high, affordability challenges will persist, weighing on sales volumes and keeping pressure on prices. Population trends will remain another key driver. Texas is unlikely to lose its appeal entirely. The state's job market, cultural diversity, and lack of income tax continue to draw people. However, migration inflows may look different. Instead of large waves of remote workers or coastal expats willing to pay almost any price, the next wave may consist of more moderate earners, local upgraders, and younger households seeking attainable housing. That shift could mean less speculative demand and more reliance on organic, income-driven growth. For markets like Austin, which leaned heavily on high-income newcomers, that may result in a slower recovery. For Houston and San Antonio, where affordability is stronger, the adjustment could be gentler. Builders and developers will also play a critical role in shaping the future. Many projects were shelved or delayed in 2024 and 2025 as financing dried up and demand faltered. If conditions improve, a new wave of construction could hit the market by 2026 to 2027. But those projects will likely look different: smaller footprints, more emphasis on affordability, and cautious timelines. Luxury towers that once defined Austin and Dallas skylines may give way to mid-market housing designed to capture the needs of local buyers rather than speculative investors. Policy choices loom large as well. State and local governments will face pressure to address property tax burdens, rising insurance premiums, and infrastructure strains. How leaders respond could influence not just affordability but long-term migration trends. Failure to tackle these challenges risks eroding Texas's reputation as a haven for growth, while effective reforms could restore confidence. In all likelihood, the next several years won't bring the frenzied boom of the pandemic era, nor the crash some fear. Instead, the Texas housing market may enter a period of slower, steadier growth, tempered by lessons learned, but still buoyed by the state's enduring strengths. For buyers, that could mean more sustainable opportunities. For sellers, it may demand patience. And for investors, it requires sharper scrutiny. By 2026 and beyond, Texas real estate won't be about chasing a frenzy. It will be about navigating a new normal, one defined by resilience, recalibration, and realism. Texas real estate, once a symbol of limitless growth and boundless demand, now stands at a crossroads. Austin's sharp reversal has shown that even the hottest markets can stumble when prices outpace wages, when mortgage rates squeeze affordability, and when inventory suddenly shifts from scarce to saturated. Across the state, from Travis County's luxury enclaves to the more modest homes of Caldwell and Bastrop, the story is no longer about bidding wars or record-breaking highs. It's about resilience, patience, and recalibration. Buyers, for the first time in years, hold more leverage. They can negotiate, take their time, and choose from a broader pool of listings. Sellers, meanwhile, are learning hard lessons, waiting longer, trimming expectations, and accepting that yesterday's playbook no longer works. Developers, investors, and brokers alike are watching closely, recognizing that the market's momentum has flipped, and with it, the balance of power. The future remains uncertain. Mortgage rates may ease, bringing fresh energy back into the market, or they may linger high, further cooling demand. Migration and job growth could keep Texas resilient, but affordability pressures may continue to drive families elsewhere. What's certain is that Texas real estate is no longer invincible. The boom has given way to a test of endurance, and the coming years will reveal who adapts, who blinks first, and who ultimately reshapes the next chapter of the Lone Star housing story.